talking about why overthinking is ruining your life and how you can change that. The two main things that I found feed into overthinking for me are expectations and assumptions, and they are linked, but they are slightly different. The way that we get past both of these things is to take action. So expectations, if we're overthinking, we might be over planning, have an idea about how a situation or a conversation is going to go. It's easy to take things for granted. You set an expectation and then it's not met. It's a recipe for disappointment. Assumptions are linked. I find this is more to do with people, because oftentimes that is the unpredictable variable in a situation. You can plan a conversation or plan what you would like to say and your part in it, but if you are assuming a certain response from someone else, it's going to be very confusing because you can't control what someone else is doing. And I think part of what, at least for me, what overthinking used to be would be that element of control. I would try and plan every possible outcome, or think that if I thought about everything a lot, then that would give me some kind of control. Like, it didn't work, obviously, but this was, I think, a way of coping. Thankfully, I've been able to replace this, and now instead of overthinking, and not always obviously, but this is a pattern that I have been able to shift, so I don't overthink nearly as often. And so instead of overthinking, I am taking action. Once you remove those expectations or assumptions and just take action, you can then look at the result, analyze it. So it's not to overthink what's happened afterwards, but it's like when you're overthinking, you're making up a whole situation, or you're assuming a whole bunch of things, or you're expecting things without any actual, data about how a conversation went or how something is going to go. You're just overthinking it, trapped in this fantasy in your mind because it's not actually happened yet. Whereas if you take action, you can then actually look at what happened and be like, okay, what can I learn from this and what can I take going forward? And so you have actual data, actual things that happened in the world that you can look at and be like, what can I learn from this? And so instead of overthinking, through action, you're learning. You're not just stuck in your head all the time. This is really obvious to me when I'm making videos, for example, for this channel. If I overthink a video, I overplan it, or I spend loads of time on it, and then it doesn't perform as well, or it doesn't meet my expectations of ways that I thought people would resonate with it, then I'm disappointed. But if I act on inspiration, emphasis on the word act, just taking action, if I act on inspiration and just create a video I'm proud of, talking about a topic that I'm passionate about, then even if that video doesn't quote unquote perform well, I am still proud of it. And I had no expectations for it anyway. I'm just happy I made it, proud of what I made, and I hope that it helps someone. It's difficult because as time goes on, especially with something like a YouTube channel, I can start to make assumptions or have expectations about the way that something will be received, because I'm like, okay, I'm making this video which is similar to one that I've done in the past, or it's on the same topic as this, or it's kind of adjacent to this topic. So then I might start to attach expectations because I'm like, this one did well, this past one, so maybe I can use that going forward. But even if we have proof or evidence that something happened a certain way in the past, again, when it comes to dealing with people, which basically I know people talk about the algorithm as this mechanical or technical thing, but it's really just the audience. The audience is made up of individual people, and people are always changing. So yeah, I may have made a video about one topic and I'm like, this video is about a similar topic, so hopefully people will like it, but it's so much to do with timing, and people are changeable. So what was once interesting, maybe people aren't interested in that anymore. So having expectations or assumptions is not going to serve me because it's just going to lead to disappointment or frustration or confusion. I'm overthinking it. And also it means that I'm not going to be sharing anything as helpful, because spur of the moment things, if I'm just acting on the way that I feel and I'm like, I have this that I would like to share on my YouTube channel, or you want to have this conversation with someone, or you just spur of the moment are like, I feel like going for a walk. You have no expectations of what's going to happen. You're just taking action. You're not overthinking it. You're not like, oh, but how do I look, or what am I wearing, or whatever. And then you go on this walk and you bump into someone with their dog and you have a nice chat. And you come back and you're like, that was so lovely. That was such a lovely moment. I didn't overthink anything. I didn't try and predict what was going to happen. I literally just stepped outside and I then bumped into someone on this nice walk. There was no assumptions or expectations. You're more able to be in the moment when you stop overthinking and just start acting. And you never know what's going to happen, especially, I guess, when it comes to being creative or something like making videos. You never know what's going to happen. If I can stop overthinking, if you can stop overthinking, magic can happen. You can't predict what's going to happen. And that's what's scary, right? It's letting go of control and just seeing what happens. And it is unpredictable. But by not overthinking, you may be surprised with what happens. And because you're not attaching any expectations to the outcome, you're just there acting, it's going to be a much more rewarding experience. Once you stop overthinking and you start taking action, you realize it's not that scary. Like, if you get something wrong or if you say the wrong thing, you weren't protecting yourself from anything bad happening by overthinking. You were just sort of trapping yourself in your head instead of just letting yourself exist and make mistakes or say the wrong thing occasionally. Most other people are not paying as much attention to it as you are. If something goes wrong, it's okay. Like, no worries. You can learn from it and move on. Being able to actually look at a situation and analyze it, as opposed to just looking at a fantasy thing that you've made in your head of like predicting what someone else is going to say, like, that's impossible. And even if something has happened where you're in a social situation and then you say something you regret and you think, oh, they've misinterpreted that, or, you know, this is why I need to like plan in advance what I'm going to say or whatever, you're still making assumptions then, because unless that person says to you, hey, did you really mean that, or like, that was hurtful, or I don't understand why you said that, unless they ask for clarification, you are just assuming that they're misinterpreting what you said. Like, they probably aren't paying as much attention to it as you are. If you are prone to overthinking, I think it's important to remember that probably no one is thinking about it as much as you are. So even if you're like, oh, I made a mistake, or why did I say that, it's probably gone over most people's heads anyway. Like, have you ever been in a big like family situation where there are people talking over each other all the time, and sometimes people will ask a question that someone has already answered, and so you're sitting there because you're observing everything. I don't know, like, it's not to do with paying more attention, but it's just like, this person has already said that, but someone's asking again, and they're like, oh, how long are you going on holiday for? And it's 2 weeks, and I know they're going to say 2 weeks because they already said that earlier on, right? Like, people are just like in the moment and not so much in their heads. And if you can both start taking more action, but also becoming mindful of when you start overthinking, and being able to be like, okay, we're not going to overthink this situation. We're just going to see how this goes. I'm not going to overthink this email. I'm not going to overthink this phone call. I'm just going to take action. And yeah, it's scary, but the more you do this, the more you see like nothing that bad is going to happen. And it's actually, you'll be really surprised by how rewarding it is, or how you are just able to have a nice conversation and you don't have to overthink it. This is kind of a bit linked to social anxiety, is sort of like under the umbrella of what we've been talking about so far, in terms of like planning what you're going to say or worrying about what other people will think. Taking action is again a way to cure that, basically. Not overthinking, putting yourself in a situation that might be quite difficult, but being like, okay, but rationally, what's the worst that's going to happen here? It's not going to be terrible, and it may even be fun or interesting. Trying to get out of your own way, get out of your own head, and just be like, I am just going to show up and see what happens. I don't have to overthink or overplan. I can just be me. The other thing I want to talk about briefly in this video is about being yourself and learning how to be confident, or learning how to just accept yourself, because once you grow your confidence and your self-acceptance, it is then a lot easier to stop overthinking, especially if you're over planning or planning what you're going to say, or wondering what other people think of you and of the decisions that you're making in your life. If you have built your self-acceptance and your self-confidence, it's a lot easier then to just show up in a situation and be like, I'm me. Yeah, okay, maybe I say things and it's a bit awkward sometimes, or maybe I talk too much when I'm nervous, or maybe I laugh too much. Like, it doesn't matter. None of it matters. You're still able to show up and just be yourself and be like, yeah, I do get really enthusiastic about the things that I like. You know, I do sometimes go off on a tangent when I'm talking about music, or I do maybe talk about books too much and maybe that's annoying to people. But like, it doesn't matter. That's not my problem. If they're annoyed, they don't have to talk to me anymore, or they can change the subject, right? So yes, assumptions and expectations. Please try and become mindful of these thought patterns when you're assuming things about people or expecting things of certain situations. Once you become mindful of it, you can then start taking action and being like, no, I can notice that I'm making an assumption here, but I don't have to pay attention to it. I can just notice it and be like, well, despite that, we're just going to take the action anyway, and we're just going to show up and see what happens and stop overthinking. I will leave a video on the screen about how to be yourself and about self-acceptance, because that's, as we talked about, quite foundational to stopping overthinking. So you can check that out if you would like. God bless. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.